Okay, team, so we're back in our Spot the Difference file here in Photoshop, and I'm going to show you how I've made some of these changes. Okay, so we have our three layers, our graphics, our puppies, and our puppies edit, and we want to double click into that Smart Object Puppies Edit. Okay, and that's going to open up our Puppies Edit Photoshop document. And now I've taken us back to the beginning here before I made any of those changes. And we're going to work on some of those changes now. So the first thing that we want to do anytime we're in a document, for whatever reason, Photoshop likes to make this background layer locked, and it doesn't work quite the same as an actual layer. So we're going to double click on that background layer, and it's going to come up and ask us to create a new layer. Okay, so I'm just going to name this original photo because that's what it is. We're going to click OK, and you'll see that little lock icon that used to be there vanish. Okay, so now we're working with our original photo, and this is where we can start making some changes. Any changes that we make, we want to do on a new layer. That's going to give us the ability to go back and get rid of them if we want to later, or find where we started. Now, with the changes that we're talking about making here, the first thing that we need to do on any of those changes is we need to select something to change. There's a lot of different ways we can select things in Photoshop. The most simple being this rectangular marquee tool. And that's the same one that we would have used when we used that keyboard shortcut earlier to select the entire artboard when we wanted to align things. Basically, it gives us the ability to click and hold and then drag our mouse around and draw a box and select whatever we want to select within a square. There's a couple different ways we can do that. If I click deselect here to go back, we also have access to some other tools like the lasso tool. The lasso tool lets me click and hold and draw the area that we want to select. So let's say it's a weird obscure shape. We can draw whatever we want to and select it like that. Now there are ways that we can select objects, and this uses some artificial intelligence to guess what we're trying to select. So let's say I wanted to select this window here. We would hope that the computer would be smart enough to see that window and select only the window, but it might try to grab the whole truck. The only way to find out is to hover over it and see what it wants to select. So you'll see that it's picking up each one of those individual puppies. But when we go up here, it's just picking up the truck. And when we go here, it's the background. So it can sometimes be helpful and sometimes not. Now, if we did want to select one of those puppies, we would just click. And then we see the little ants marching around the puppy. And we could do some cool stuff with the puppy. So those are some of the ways to select. There are other ways, and we'll work on those in the future. For this one, I want to get started with our back window. I'm going to use the lasso tool. And I'm going to click and hold. I'm going to draw around the window, and I don't have to be super precise. I just want to make sure that I include the whole window in my selection. That's what it's going to look like once it's selected. And then because we want to work with a new layer, we're going to copy what's within that selection and paste it. So we can go up here to edit and copy, or we can use the keyboard shortcut Control C. Once we have that copied, we want to paste it to a new layer. So again, we can do edit and paste or Control V. And you'll see over here in your layers panel, it has created a new layer with just what was selected. So if I turn off the original photo layer, all we have left is that window where we selected. We want to give it a name, so I'm going to call it window. And now we can start making our edits. So if I go back to our move tool, it's going to give us these handles again, and we can go ahead and make that window bigger. Now again, anytime we're using these handles, if I grab one of the edges, it's going to let me drag it in that direction. If I want to scale it in all directions, I can hold down Alt and it's going to scale it from the center. And if I don't want it to be proportional, meaning that the width and the height are maintained proportionally, then I can hold down the shift button as well, and then it's going to let me just change the width if I go with that handle, or just change the height if I go with this handle. And that's by holding down shift. Without shift, it's going to make it proportional. So let's go ahead and make this window significantly larger, but still so that it fits on the back of that truck. You can also move it around by clicking and dragging. I'm going to leave it right about there. We can tap the arrow keys to move it around a little bit as well. Just kind of get it centered in the middle there. And then when I'm done, I'm going to hit enter. So now we have a bigger window. If I turn that visibility off, you can see how much bigger it's gotten. The problem is it doesn't look super realistic because we have all of this area on the outside that doesn't blend in very well, and we want to fix that. So that's where layer masks come in. There's a couple different ways to apply a layer mask to this layer. We want to turn that on, and what it's going to allow us to do is to hide and show certain parts of that layer. So the easiest way to do it while we're selected on that window layer is to come down here to the bottom of our layers panel and click the layer masks button. And that's going to add a layer mask to that layer. The layer mask is this white square. That shape will always be consistent with the size of our artboard. Now in a mask, anything that's white is visible and anything that's black is invisible. Anything that's in between in our gray ranges would be translucent, and it would be the opacity of it would depend on what shade of gray we use. So let's say we wanted to create this layer mask to kind of blend in the edges. We want to paint some black on there to hide the parts that we don't want to see. So making sure we've selected the layer mask, then we want to grab our paintbrush tool. We want to go down here to the default colors, and we're going to hit this little bent arrow and make sure that black is our foreground color. We can use holding down the Alt key and scrolling on our mouse if we have a scroll wheel to zoom in, like so. Or we can use the keyboard shortcut Control plus to zoom in and Control minus to zoom out. I'm going to zoom in on this window a little bit. Once we're zoomed in, instead of using these scroll bars to move around, which we can do, it's kind of handy if you hold down the space bar, you'll see it turns into a hand, the cursor, and then you can click and drag and kind of grab your screen and move it around like that as well. So I want to get that right in the center. The little circle cursor that's showing up is our paintbrush. We can go up here to the top to change our brush options with things like size. So if I drag the size of it up, you'll see the circle gets larger. And if I drag it down, it gets smaller. And then this hardness tool determines the edges of our brush, meaning that if I turn it all the way to 100 and I try painting, you'll see the edge is really crisp. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that change so that I can show you. If I turn the hardness all the way down to 0, now when I paint, the edge is nice and smooth, okay? And we're going to want it to be smooth. Maybe not 0, but somewhere in that 0 to 30 range. And then I'm going to go around the window and I'm going to click and hold to activate my brush. And I'm just going to make sure that all the edges are nice and blended and that you can't really see those crisp lines where we've put the new window. Now, when you're in here doing this, you might find when you get down close to the puppies, you need a little bit more precision. So you would want your brush size to be smaller. So I can go back up here to size. The keyboard shortcut to make it smaller is the little square brackets. So the left bracket makes it smaller and the right bracket makes it larger. And those are the keyboard buttons just to the right of the letter P. So I'm going to make it nice and small so that when I go down here, I'm not getting into the window because we want it to be nice and crisp, but we want to make sure we get rid of these funky edges. And now you'll notice this portion here, maybe I got into the window a little bit there and I don't like it. Typically what you do is undo or Control Z, but because we're using a layer mask here, we've made that invisible by painting it black. We know that we can paint it white to bring it back. So I'm going to switch to white, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to paint it back a little bit and work on that blending kind of from the opposite direction and fix that little error that we made. So now if I use Control minus and scroll back out, that window looks pretty nice and blended now. You can hardly tell. If I hide the layer, you can see the original, and then when I bring it back, you can see the new one. So it looks like a real window, and it might be kind of hard for our viewer to tell. There was a couple other changes that we made. One of them was adding a new taillight down here on the right. So again, let's select that taillight. I'm going to use my lasso tool. Maybe I'll zoom in a little bit. And we're going to draw around the taillight by clicking and holding. We'll get those marching ants. Now we want to make sure that we're selecting those pixels on the original photo. So click on that layer. And again, we're going to copy and paste those pixels from the original photo into a new layer. So we can do Edit, Copy, or Control C as a keyboard shortcut. And Edit and Paste, or Control V. And again, it's going to paste a new layer called Layer 1. We want to double click on it to give it a name. So let's call it Taillight. And hit Enter to save that. So now we've got this taillight here. So again, if I want to alt click on that to show only that layer, you can see that we just have that taillight. Okay, and I'll alt click again to turn the other layers back on. And now what we want to do with this taillight, instead of changing the size of it, we want to change the location of it. So we'll use our move tool, and we're just going to click and hold, and we're going to drag down. And we're going to put the new taillight somewhere down here below the original taillight. We'll hit Enter to save our changes. Now again, we have this weird, awkward, extra bunch of pixels above and around it, and we want to hide those. So we're going to turn on a layer mask. We'll see our layer mask here. It's all white. So we want to grab our paintbrush, and we want to make it black. And let's zoom in a little bit more, and we're going to try to get rid of those extra pixels around the edge of our taillight without painting over the taillight, because that would make it disappear. So this is a case where we might want our brush to be nice and small so we can get really detailed. And we're just getting rid of all of those extra pixels that we don't need around our paintbrush. And maybe we want to turn up the hardness on the edge of our brush, not quite to 100, but close, so that we can get those nice crisp edges along our taillight. There's a couple that I got here that I didn't want to. So we're going to switch the colors again. I can either do that by clicking on the little bent arrow, or I can click X on the keyboard, which will switch them as well. And we'll make sure we turn these pixels back on so we get the edge of that taillight. I'm going to click X again to get our black back, get rid of some of these. And I think that looks pretty good. And we'll zoom out to have a look. Looks pretty realistic to me. Okay. The last one that we're going to do is duplicating one of those puppies. So we want to make it so that there's one more puppy than in the original photo. So if you remember when we were talking about how to select, we had our object select tool. We can click on that, and we can hover over these puppies and have a look at them and see which one we might want to copy. I think I want to copy this guy here. So I'm going to click on him to select. Again, we're going to do an edit, copy, and an edit, paste. It's going to make a new puppy layer. We don't want it to be called layer 1, so we'll double click, and we're going to call it puppy. And now we can use our move tool to move our new puppy, and let's drop him in up here. We'll zoom in a little bit, and we want to drop him in kind of right behind these other puppies, but he's sitting on top of these guys. So in order to fix that, we need to add our layer mask and then grab our black paintbrush. We'll see it's black. And we want to start painting away the spots where this new puppy overlaps the old puppies. Now you'll see what I did there. I accidentally painted that black on the layer, not on the layer mask. So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that. And I want to make sure that I am clicked onto the layer mask here. That's where I want to paint my black, not on the actual photo. Now that I'm on the layer mask, I can paint that black and it's going to make it disappear. So we'll make sure that we have the right settings. And we're going to slowly get rid of that puppy a little bit so that it's blended in and it looks like the other puppy sitting up in front of him. Now if I get rid of too many pixels, I can hit that X key to change our foreground color to white, and I can paint some of them back in here and make sure that it looks like that puppy belongs. I'm going to get rid of some of these up here so that we see the original dog that was there. And again, I got rid of a little bit too much, so I'll hit the X key to get my white paintbrush back. And I'm going to paint some of those pixels back in there of our new puppy. Make sure we don't miss out on his cute little nose. And there we have it. So now it looks like he's kind of tucked in there behind this puppy and this puppy. And we'll zoom back out. And it looks pretty realistic. So those are the changes that we're going to make for now. In my original, we got rid of this carabiner down here. We can work on that. We also got rid of the E and replaced it with an O. Those are pretty much the same techniques though as what we did down here at the taillight. So that should be enough to get you started. When you want to see these changes reflected back in your original document, all we have to do is save the work we've done in this Photoshop document, which we can do by doing File, Save, or we can just close this tab and it's going to ask us if we'd like to save the changes that we made. We're of course going to click on Yes. And when we get back into this document, now we'll see those changes. So we have our extra tail light, our extra big window, and we have our extra puppy here.